Good evening. And Todd, I do appreciate you leading. You do a great job. All right. It's good to see you guys tonight, especially young folks here. We missed you guys last week. It's always better when you're with us. We are still doing lessons from the life of Jacob. This is the final journey, but not quite the final lesson. So sorry. My plan is maybe one more. That's the plan, so don't hold me to it, but I'm going to try. One more after this one, and we'll wrap up this series on Jacob. So in Jacob's life, as we've looked at it, there have been three major moves, three major journeys that he has made. The first one was when he left his hometown. He's relatively a young man. He's leaving home, setting out for the first time on his own. That's where he first has an encounter with God on his own. And as a relatively young man, he's got strength. We see there when he's sort of showing off in front of Rachel, he moves that really heavy stone. So there's this display of strength. And then years later, when he leaves his uncle Laban's place, he's moving on. He's ready to leave. You get the sense of he's ready for a new start, and there's also there a display of strength. There's this wrestling with God, this striving with God, and we find he wrestles all through the night with God. And so in both of those moves, there's been something of looking forward to something and a great deal of strength. This is the third journey. He's leaving home again in the text that we're going to look at today, but now he's 130 years old. That's a little different. 130 years old, moving. Now, our situation is not exactly like his, but I want to just think just for a minute about the differences in our outlook from when we are young to when we are older. When you're young, you have a sense that your whole life is ahead of you, even though you don't know that. You have a sense that your whole life is ahead of you, and none of us really know how things are going to go. But there's a sense of adventure. I'm kind of ready for what's next. What am I going to do? There's some excitement about it. There's optimism. The future is bright. And so we step into adventures and journeys with anticipation and readiness. When we're older, it's harder. We're wearied. We've had a lot of hardship. And the outlook can be a little bit bleak. And so sometimes we get maybe a little bit more pessimistic. We've seen our hopes and dreams dashed so many times, it's hard to look forward to the future with any kind of optimism. Or sometimes we get grumpy. I'm not looking at anybody in particular tonight. We're just hardened. We've just had a hard road. Maybe we're discouraged. Maybe we're sad. There's anxiety. At every point of our journey, there's things that we're anxious about. But as we get older, there's new things that we're anxious about. And sometimes we just get stuck in that place of having a bleak outlook. And I think, I hope that what we look at tonight will kind of help us lift our eyes wherever we're at on the journey, but especially if you're in that later season of life, to just lift your eyes up a little bit. Look with optimism and anticipation toward the future. So we're going to see this final journey in three scenes. It begins with unbelievable news. So I got to remind you of the context. Jacob's 11 sons have gone to Egypt to get bread, and they took Benjamin. You remember how reluctant Jacob was to let his baby boy, he wasn't a baby, he didn't want to let him go, but he finally lets him go because they've got to have bread. They're going to die if they don't. So he lets go with a prayer. That was what we talked about last week. And now he's waiting. Are they going to come back? And when they come, will they have Simeon? And especially, will they have Benjamin? He's got no text updates, no Facebook. He's just waiting. Well, Genesis chapter 45, verse 25 is where we're going to pick up. This is where they return. And a lot has changed. While they were there, they learned that the Lord of the land, that mysterious, scary figure, that powerful Egyptian that has been giving them so much grief, is actually their long-lost brother, the one they sold into slavery. And they have figured out who he is. So Joseph is there, he's alive, but Jacob doesn't know that yet. Genesis 45, verse 25. So they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. Now, just a quick note right there, those geographical references are huge. That line, don't read it too fast, it's a foreshadow of the Exodus. They went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan. It's a foreshadow of the Exodus, which is a foreshadow of the gospel. So much packed in a little line. And they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. That is a big sentence. And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. So his heart became numb there, verse 26. Some translations say stunned. I think we all would be. Literally, his heart grew weak. There may have been some physiological response. I think that would make sense for any normal human being, but especially one 130 years old. That's a lot to hear in one sentence. One commentator said the good news almost killed him. He's 130 years old. That's a lot to take, and he is stunned. His heart grew weak. But it's more than that. It's more than just physiological. He's incredulous. He's unable or unwilling to believe this news. And there in verse 26, for he did not believe them. I imagine him shaking his head. No, I'm not going to believe that. There's no way. Joseph has been dead for 2 decades. In his mind, his son has been dead for 2 decades. It is unbelievable enough to claim that he's alive. You add on to that he's ruler in the land of Egypt? I don't think so. No, that's too much. But eventually he believes. It says his spirit revived there in verse 27. I imagine his whole posture changing, his facial expression changing as that belief comes. And there are 2 things that help him move from this unbelief and numbness of heart to a reviving in belief. He hears and he sees. He hears a message from Joseph. So if you back up and look at verses 9 through 11, Joseph had said, tell my father this. And in 3 bullet points, it's this. God has made me ruler. I think that's really significant. God. God has made me ruler. So hurry and come down to Egypt with all that you have, and you will live near me in Goshen. So he gets this message from his son, and then he sees with his eyes the wagons. And so we learn in verses 16 through 20 that Pharaoh himself had sent a whole bunch of wagons and donkeys, a.k.a. moving vans, okay, and food and clothes. Basically, Pharaoh said, I'll cover the moving cost. I mean, he holds Joseph in high regard. So his family is held in high regard. So he says, I'll pay for it. So all of these wagons and donkeys and clothing and food come. And so Jacob is getting his mind around all of this. I'm hearing that my son is alive, that he's ruler of all of Egypt, and I'm looking at all this stuff that I know my sons did not steal. There's no way they would have got out of Egypt with all that. So he comes to this place of belief. And so verse 28, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. So he's going to go on this journey. Believing that Joseph is alive will now completely reorient his life. And I want to just pause for a minute and think about how that relates to us, okay? If I could just put it in a statement here, I'll just say the good news that Jesus is risen changes everything. That reality that he is alive changes the entire course of our life. It changes our outlook, our commitments. It changes everything. There's so many parallels in this story to Jesus, the story of Jesus, especially his resurrection. You've got Joseph, who's, we'll say death in parentheses, because he didn't die, but it was a death to Jacob. His death was actually God saving. What, from all appearances, looked to be devastating tragedy and loss was actually God working a rescue for many. It's a foreshadow of Jesus. And now Jacob is hearing this news. He is alive, and it's unbelievable. You go to the Gospels, Luke 24:11, when the disciples hear that Jesus is alive, but these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe him. They did not believe them. That's unbelievable. There's just no way. Luke 24:22, this is really interesting. It says, moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early this morning. Now, that would not have been something that would have caught my attention, but I hope I don't lose everybody here. In the Septuagint, so the Greek translation of the text that we're looking at tonight, when it says that his heart went numb or he was stunned, the Greek translation puts amazed. And they use the same Greek word that's used with this reaction, that they're amazed at what they hear coming from the tomb. It's like hyperlinks. These are connected. He's alive. That's unbelievable. That's stunning. That's amazing news. That's unbelievable news that changes everything. Like Jacob, the not believing disciples, these disciples that can't believe that Jesus is risen, eventually they hear and see enough to believe. And that's where I think it's good for us to be tonight. Just put yourself for a minute in Jacob's shoes. We haven't seen the risen Christ, but we've seen and heard enough to believe. And with that belief, we're revived. That reality changes everything. It lifts our eyes. The outlook is different because we believe that reality. Romans 15:13, this is a verse that I've got in my just regular rotation of Scripture that I pray in the morning. And in the last couple of years, just 2 or 3 times a week, this being in my prayer has really helped me. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing. That's the word that for 2 years I've just been underlining in my head, in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. There's this joy and peace and abounding hope that comes in believing what our eyes haven't yet seen. We've seen and heard enough to believe it. We believe it. And there's some reviving that comes with that. So hear that tonight. Believe. He's risen. Changes everything. The whole course of your life. Now, you set out to follow him. You're going to be a little bit like Jacob. There is some element of an uncertain future. You don't know exactly how things are going to go. Jacob is moving to Egypt. 130 years old. There are no airlines, no interstates, no Dairy Queens, no weather apps, no hospitals, no Walmart, no Walgreens. And he's not as spry as he once was. This is going to be a different journey than any he's had before. I think it's really hard for us to imagine how dangerous and difficult of a journey this would be and how frightening it would be to leave home, the place that was promised to you where you have finally settled, and now in your 130th year, you're going to go to a foreign place among a foreign people. In scary times, in times of famine. I just think we can't, I think it's hard for us to grasp how hard this would be. Verse 1 of chapter 46. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba. And he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. A couple of things to notice here. Beersheba. So this is the only stop that's recorded on this journey. He's going to Egypt. This is the only stop that is recorded. This will be the last stop before exiting Canaan. This is the southernmost habitable city. This would have been his hometown where he grew up. Great deal of significance here. He's leaving the promised land. It's like leaving Texas. Okay, you're at this moment where it's like from here on, it's different. Home, promised land, everything I've known behind me. In front of me, everything scary, everything dangerous. And right there, he offered sacrifices in a spontaneous act of worship. And it's a fitting place to do it. His grandfather Abraham worshiped here, Genesis chapter 21 and 26. God appeared to his father Isaac at this place, Genesis chapter 26. Special place to him. So he worships. And in the night, some kind of a vision of the night, which otherwise we might call a dream. God speaks to him and he says, Jacob, Jacob. When you repeat the name like that, it's an expression of intimacy. And Jacob says, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt. I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Oh man, this has got to be just so greatly reassuring to him. God identifies himself. I'm the God of your father. We've got a history. I'm not an unknown God to you. You know me. There's a family history with me. You don't need to be afraid. Don't be afraid. And then he reaffirms the promise. I will make you into a great nation, even there, even in Egypt. The promises are not undone because you're going to a foreign place. I'm going to keep my promise to you. And he pledges to go with him and bring him up again. I will go with you. Your son Joseph's going to close your eyes. Greatly reassuring. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried. That's interesting to me. It's putting him in the category 130 years old with the more vulnerable ones in the family. The sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt. Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. It's a way of stressing this is essentially a permanent move. And it's not ultimately permanent, but for him and his family right then, this is a permanent move. This is not just we're going to make a quick trip to Egypt and be back. They all go. The whole clan is going into Egypt. And this begins the next major chapter of redemptive history in Egypt and coming out of Egypt. Next, just a huge major transition is happening at this point. Now, I mentioned uncertain future because none of us know what's coming. Just like Jacob, we don't know what we're going to face. But as disciples of Jesus, we do not face an uncertain future. Even though we don't know exactly how things are going to go, we can have a great deal of certainty about what is going to come. Jacob was apparently afraid. It doesn't exactly say he was afraid, but that's what God comes and says, don't be afraid. Why might he be afraid? Well, I think, one, God had told his father in Genesis 26, don't go down to Egypt. So maybe there's some reservation about, God said don't go, but my son's alive. Maybe there's that kind of fear. But I think there's also probably with it just the normal fears of an unknown place, unknown people, a difficult journey, and you're 130 years old. And Jacob's a guy just like us. And we have fears too, all of us, young or old. They're different. They're different on the season of life or the situation that we're in, but we have fears. I know when I was younger, I had a great fear of failure. I had a fear of not being good enough. It can be a paralyzing fear. As you get older, it changes a little bit, and maybe it's heartache. Maybe it's grief. I don't want to go through that. I've seen the kind of heartache that I don't want to endure that. Or maybe it's death. I mean, we say we're not afraid of death, but man, death is just tyrannical. It just holds its thumb down on humanity, and there is something frightful about it. Maybe we're afraid of being a burden. We get older in life and we lose our strength, and we got to depend on other people, and can get kind of anxious about that. Or maybe it's running out of money. What if I outlive my resources? There's all kinds of new fears that come in those different seasons of life. We may not know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know exactly how things are going to go. Maybe the things we fear are going to happen. But here's what we can be certain of. We can be certain that God is with us and that he will do what he ultimately promised. Our future, as unpredictable as it is in the care of a faithful God. And ultimately, we have the sure and certain hope of resurrection. So you hang on to it. You go into the unknown saying, I know who's with me, and I know how it's going to end up. And so my outlook on the uncertainties and the unknown is different. Some of you are familiar with Corrie ten Boom. She's part of a Dutch family who helped Jews escape the Nazis. She and her family were captured and eventually put into a concentration camp, which she survived. And coming out of that, she's got this famous statement. You've probably heard this quote. She says, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." That is so good. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know our God. Don't be afraid to trust God, this God you know, even if the future is unknown. You think about Psalm 23, you got to bring it to mind over and over again. The Lord is my shepherd. No matter what I face, I've got a shepherd with me. The Lord is my shepherd. Remember that line in there? I will fear no evil, for you are with me. That's the center of the psalm. That's the main message of it. Because you are with me, I won't be afraid. That's where that changes the outlook on things. Also think about the Great Commission, because we as a church are on a journey together. As Christians, we have this mission. We're part of a mission that's bigger than us, that outlives us. You think about that Great Commission. There's much we could say about it, but I want to call your attention to the end. Let's read it all. Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." This is a continuing mission that's going on in the life of Jacob and his sons. It's going on to present day, this mission to the nations. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. That's the promise of the one that we follow, the one we journey with and for. He says, I will be with you. So we take confidence in that, and it changes the way we see everything around us. The last scene in here is about unexpected joys. So if you would, skip down to chapter 46, verse 28. This is when they arrive in Egypt. So they go from that last stop, reassured of God's promises. God is going to go with them. Now they get to Egypt, verse 28. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. That's interesting. It's kind of ironic because Judah was one of the key players in getting Joseph in the situation he's in to begin with. And now he is facilitating the reunion. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. Literally, it says he hitched his chariot. He's hitching the horses. The details are just interesting to me because sometimes the narrative moves fast and sometimes it slows down. It's like, why do we need to know about him hitching the chariot? It's like, slow down. This is a big moment. It's like heightens the anticipation. He presented himself to him. That is, Joseph presented himself to his father and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." So they saw each other, hugged, cried a good while. This is such a human moment. We don't really need words. There aren't really words for that, just tears for that kind of moment. This is a joy that Jacob only had in his dreams, 20 years of dreams. You think about how often he probably wept and just wished one more time he could hug his son. And now he does. Now, some people have looked at this and they point out the fact that it says Joseph wept. It doesn't say that Jacob wept. You know, I don't think that's the point. I don't see that at all. I think this is 20 years of wishing he could hug his son one more time coming true. And there just aren't words for that. Just incredible, unexpected joy. But it is surprising that he says, "Now let me die." I mean, that seems strange. But you got to remember, he's 130 years old. The past 2 decades have been miserable. He has had a restless existence. And it's like all of that has come to an end, and he's saying, now I can die at peace. My journey's finished. I can rest now. But Joseph, like any son, is like, no, first, we got other plans here. You're going to meet the king, and then we're going to settle you down right here in Goshen. So look at chapter 47, verse 1. There's some interaction that happens with Pharaoh, and eventually Joseph brings his father before him. And then Joseph brought in Jacob, his father, and stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Okay, that happens again in verse 10. 2 times here, Jacob blessed him. That's really important because it's the superior one that blesses the other. Jacob is blessing the king. In the big story of redemptive history, the patriarchs are greater than the kings of Egypt. And that's a pretty big moment, superior status. It would also be because of his age. Where an old person like that would be regarded as having divine favor and wisdom. So he probably has a great deal of respect for being 130 years old. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? That's a point of curiosity in Egyptian culture. Man, 130 years old. You're an awfully old guy. Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their sojourning. So 130 years would have been extraordinary to an Egyptian. Their ideal age, just culturally for Egyptians, their ideal age was 110. If you lived to be 110, that's ideal age, which, by the way, is how long Joseph lived, the ideal Egyptian. 130, the way he says this, some have suggested it might be a little bit of a flex in front of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's like, man, how old are you? It's like, well, 130, but that's really nothing. I mean, my dad was 180, his dad 175. Really, I've had a pretty hard life. You know, when it says few and evil, it's probably better translated few and hard. It's like I've had it rough. It's been a hard road, so I'm not probably going to make it as long as my ancestors did. You know, he says, I've had it rough. It's been few and hard. Some have said he's a little cranky there. He's honest. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his brother and his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents. All right, so real quickly, just a lesson to draw out from that. Don't underestimate God's ability to give joy when it seems you'll never have it again. He sets out on this journey with fear, in a time of famine. What am I going to face? And he gets settled in the best of the land, with Joseph providing everything for them, although Joseph is really clear, it's God. God sent me. God is saving lives. So he finds himself settled in the best of the land. And even though he says, now let me die, do you know how long it is before he dies? He lives to be 147. He lives 17 more years, which is an interesting number because Joseph was 17 years old when Jacob lost him. It's like saying, all the years you had with Joseph, I'm going to give you all that again. He gets as much time with him at the end as he had from the start. Now, things may not work out always like that for us in such a balanced way. You know, whatever's taken from us, we get it back the same measure. I don't think that's what this is telling us, but I think it is telling us something true. God restores joy, and he can bring it in surprising places. He can give it in places and times that you would not have predicted. It's true for this life. In this life, in places and times when you would never predict joy is possible, he can bring it. And in the future, it's certainly true. Ways we can be certain of that God will restore joy. Romans 8:18, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. You look up, you look forward. The future is really glorious. Don't lose sight of that. In the middle of the hardship and the difficulty, don't lose sight of this. So wherever you are on the journey, look up with eyes of faith. Believe Jesus is risen. It changes everything. Be assured that God is with you and not done with you. Even when we think he's done, he's not done. Whatever you face, whatever comes, he will shepherd you. And watch out that you don't, in any season of life, grow so sour or pessimistic that you miss the joys of that season that God gives. This evening, if you've got something that we can pray together about, or if you are not a Christian, you want to put your faith in Christ, actually somebody was baptized here this afternoon. If anybody wants to, it'd be great to do that. I invite you to the front while we stand and sing.